precious child. I've called your name. Nothing can take you from my hand. I'm still the same.
So, the Sunday before Lent, and you could say that we continue our journey of discipleship. I know that we had the mini-series looking at the Wizard of Oz and some bits and bobs of that in relation to discipleship, but there's a sense in which as we approach Lent, our discipleship journey continues. Now, as we know, Lent is a period of preparation. It's a period for prayer, for reflection, and even self-examination. And we do that as we move towards Holy Week and Good Friday and Easter Sunday and everything that comes with it. And as we know, this Ash Wednesday coming is where we begin that journey into Lent. So to help us with this for today, we're going to look at the passage from Exodus and the experience that Moses had in that story that we heard there. And we're going to consider it as well, to a degree, as how it kind of connects with the rule of life. I'm going to let you make those sort of connections as we speak and as we listen. But that's what we need to have in mind as we hear about Moses' experience and how it can relate to us for today as well. So first of all, we hear Moses being called by God. And if you want to keep hold of the sheet, I'm going to refer back to that reading a few times. And it says this: "The Lord said to Moses, come up to the mountain, or come up to me on the mountain, and wait there, and I will give you the tablets of stone which I have written for their instruction, the law and the commandment." So, where's a man, Moses? A man who, it would appear, is in tune with God. A man who has spent time listening and is ready and prepared to hear God's call on his life. He's already had God's call on his life as he led the people out of Egypt and out of slavery and, yes, into the wilderness, and this is where we find them now. But he's obviously been spending time with God to hear God and to listen to God. And that comes through spending time in God's presence, creating space and opportunity for it to happen, so that when God does speak, he recognizes God's voice and his call that is coming from God. Now, I'm sure all this sort of spending time and listening and getting in tune with God, there'd have been plenty of times with Moses when he'd have heard absolutely nothing. It would seem like God was silent and wasn't even taking any notice. I'm sure he went through all of those kind of things, but it was by spending those kind of times, even when it seemed like nothing was going on, that when it finally does come, he's ready and he's prepared. So it would be fair to say that even in those times that he spent with God, in God's presence, but not hearing a thing, it wasn't wasted time. It's a time of being disciplined to actually continue to do that. It's preparation time so that when the word comes, he's ready to hear it and respond to it. So secondly, when the call comes, he's ready to be obedient to it in verse 13 there, where it says this: "So Moses set out with his assistant Joshua, and Moses went up the mountain of God." So God calls him and he obeys. He acts upon what God has asked him to do, of what God is requiring of him. He doesn't dismiss it and he doesn't ignore it, but he listens and he responds and he goes. And I think it's fair to say that listening and responding, or listening and hearing and responding, all go hand in hand. And that's what we're called to do as well, to hear and to listen out for God's voice, and when it comes, to respond to it. Thirdly, and in a funny sort of way, it's interesting what God asks of him, and we can learn much from this, because in verse 12 again, "Come up to me on the mountain and wait there." That's the bit I was after, the wait there bit. Now, God calls him to come and spend time aside. He spends some specific and particular time with God. It was time away from the pressures, from the hassles, from the responsibilities he had as being the leader of his people, and everything that comes with it. So he's called to sort of leave that behind for a period of time and to give his attention in a new way for that particular time to what God is asking for him and of him, and preparing him for what God is going to ask of him next, a new venture that is going to come, if you like. And the same comes for us as well. I mean, we're called by God to come away, to spend particular time in his presence, and to come away from those things that maybe fill up our lives, or even you could say clutter up our lives. Now, I know that some people have said in the past, well, you know, I haven't got time to do that. I haven't got time for these things, you know, to spend that kind of time. Now, I'm not asking people to sort of take a solid whole time away, but consider this for Lent. How much time each day would you either spend watching telly, or on your phone, or reading a paper, or on a tablet? I mean, would it be that bad if for a short period of time in the day that you didn't spend 2 hours watching Good Morning with Philip and Hoofer, whatever her name is, I can never remember. Used to be Fern in the old days, I think, didn't it? How many times can we sort of think of, okay, I could actually, for a short period of time, not do that, but step away from it and do this in God's presence. Fourthly, part of the instruction to come aside and was, as we acknowledged just there, to wait. When Moses goes up the mountain and it seems like a cloud, and has anybody ever been to that region, Mount Sinai? I mean, I've never been there. I know some people have been there and have an idea what it's like. And I suppose it's a little bit like the Lake District, when you can be walking up a mountain or up a hill on a nice sunny day, and before you know it, you get to the top and the clouds descended and you can't see anything. And I could imagine it's a little bit like that. But God calls him in the middle of that to wait. Now, we are a people these days that live in the world of the instant, the immediate. We expect everything now. In fact, we don't expect it now. We expected it yesterday. We want everything to happen that quickly. So these days, it's not easy to wait and not expect anything immediately. So for some people, they might sort of think, well, it just sounds like a complete and utter waste of time, just waiting. But there are times when God does ask us to wait, to not expect immediately something to happen. But in those times, we learn trust, and we learn patience, and we can learn stillness and quiet as well. And in the busyness of life, those things can be extremely important. Being still and waiting upon God will be rewarded. That's, in a sense, what Moses was promised. Something was going to happen by sort of taking that time and waiting. So it's, again, never a waste of time to do that, but can be quite profitable and fruitful as well. Moses waits for 6 days. Now, I can't imagine any of us sitting there for 6 days waiting for something to happen. I think most of us would have packed up, gone home, and decided enough's enough. Moses waits for 6 days, but on the 7th day, that's when God speaks out to him again. And from here, Moses' experience of God increases. It intensifies. It takes on, in a sense, a new dynamic as more of God's glory is revealed to him, and he begins to receive these commandments that God wants us to live by and to honor in relation to how his people could live with God. And so Moses was in a place, having listened and heard and responded and waited. He was ready to receive more of what God had in store for him by doing that. And I think if we take heed of some of those examples here in this scenario and put them into practice for ourselves, and maybe focus on this during Lent, have a consider and a think and a reflect on how we can put some of this into practice, even just for a short period of time each day in Lent, then I'm sure that our experience of Easter and everything that comes with it will be far more profound, will be far more uplifting, and will have God's blessing on it even more. So something to maybe think about and consider as we approach this particular season as to what we can do, as well as what we might not do during Lent, but what we can do instead as well.
My emotions are up and down when your love is never down. Oh Lord, I'm so glad you are here. Your love had you die for me, then you came back to life for me. Oh Lord, I'm yours forever. No height or depth, or life or death can separate us from the love of Christ. No angels or demons or all of creation can separate us from the love of Christ. My shackles you tossed away, my sin is so far away, as far as the east from the west. Though battles may still go on, the war is already won, 'cause Jesus is alive. No height or depth, or life or death can separate us from the love of Christ. No angels or demons or all creation can separate